We are in Champions League, man.
That was my next
Dilly din, dilly dong, come on.
Ancora Messi, 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 gol, 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 gol.
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it!
I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
This is the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast with Gary Curneen.
Aguero!
Hello, welcome to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. My name is Gary Curneen. First off, hope everyone is doing okay and staying safe. Our guest today is Fabrizio Piccareta, current under-17 coach at Roma, former assistant coach at Sunderland and Swindon Town, UEFA Pro license holder. You are going to love this one. Absolutely brilliant insight. Let me know what you think at Gary Curneen on Instagram, at Gary Curneen on Twitter. This podcast is brought to you by Bounce Athletics. Stay tuned for a special offer on custom training balls and Dynamo goals for podcast listeners. If you're looking for some reading, some content, we've opened up Modern Soccer Coach community platform. We've also uploaded a lot of stuff on the modernsoccercoach.com website. Please go ahead and check it out. Here is Fabrizio. Enjoy. Fabrizio, thanks so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Really excited to have you on.
Thank you for the invite, and looking forward to have a chat with you.
Yeah, we've had quite a few guests on the podcast. We've never had an Italian coach on, so you're the first one. And the question that I wanted to ask was, when I was growing up, there was two sides to the Italian game. There was the ultra defensive, gentile side of it. Serie A was always a hard league to score in. A lot of English strikers went over there and couldn't score. And then there's this Italian playmaker, the Baggios, the Zola, the Mancinis, the Tottis of the world. I was wondering which part of the Italian culture were you drawn towards when you were growing up in the game?
I'm 55, so you can easily understand that I grown up in the 70s, 80s. My football roots, are back at that time, and it was a time where Italian football style was well renowned to be defensive, a strong defensive identity. Catenaccio, is a famous word that describes very well that kind of football based on strong man marking, deep defensive blocks, counter-attack. And if you think that at the time in my playing years I was a number 10, you can understand that I didn't enjoy too much that kind of football. Of course, then there is also the other side of the coin, which is players like Baggio, Zola, Mancini. We are talking about big talents, and it's quite a paradox, between the two sides of football. In my playing time, as I said, I didn't enjoy it that much. So when I start to coach, I always thought that I would like to my players to enjoy more football, which means, when you start to play football when you're a kid, you don't think about chasing people around the pitch. You want to have the ball, because is why we start to play football. And I think if you can recreate this in the player's mind, and you can make it like a football style, then you can have more enjoyment. When I talk about enjoyment, I don't mean to have fun. I mean something more inside. Enjoyment to play, to run, to even to defend. But when you know that as a player you can have the ball most of the time, then you are more will to defend and to run when you don't have the ball. This has been always the key of my coaching style and my coaching philosophy. I don't think now Italian football can be can have again the same tag, the same trademark. Football has changed also in Italy, and if you talk about coaches like Sarri, even the young coaches like De Zerbi in Italy, Gattuso himself, even if it was a totally different kind of player, as a coach, he likes to give to his team this kind of identity, more possession-based football. So I'm happy that even in Italy we change our style to more possession-based football.
Yeah, it's Italian football has got a great reputation around the world as on a tactical level, and I saw the quote from Mourinho. He called Italy the most difficult country that tactically he had worked in, and then Rui Faria has the video where he said, in the same moment your opponent was adapting to you, you were adapting to them. It was a continuous fighting from a tactical point of view, back and forth. So I'm fascinated by how Italian football has this, I suppose, adapting back and forth, but then also has the consistency in the game model. How difficult is that to build?
Again, Mourinho experience in Italy goes back to 12 years ago. And also Mourinho himself, I remember once he said that his football style, his idea of football is, and still is, I think, if you have a Ferrari and I have a small car, if I want to win, I can't compete with you, so I have to put sugar in your tank, which is basically what he did in his Italian time. But I can understand what Mourinho and Rui Farias meant, because tactics in Italy has always been always meant study the opponent and try to adapt to the opponent, try to play in a way that could put in trouble the opponents, more than create a consistent identity. Mm-hmm. Again, this has changed in the last few years in Italy, where you can have, again, coaches like Maurizio Sarri, who are more keen to have their own identity and maybe don't have a plan B, but just stick to their football style, no matter what the opponents can do. Which is, I think in football, like in everything else, you have to have balance. So for me, in my point of view, you have to have a strong identity. You have to give to your team something that all the players can recognize. They can feel part of something. They know what can happen during the game, but this doesn't mean that you can't have a plan B. For example, when I was in Finland, I was a coach at FC Interturku, is a first division club, and I always try to give this kind of identity to my team. But we had the privilege to reach the cup final, and I knew at the time that I had to play against a much stronger team than mine, and I have to adapt this just for one game, but the target was to win that specific game, which was the final, and we win it with 23% of possession, 23, which is nothing. But in that moment, in that specific game, I asked my players to do something completely different from what I asked them to do usually during the league, during the other games. And this leads to another of my coaching pillars. If you are credible to your players and you can convince them that what you are offering to them, what you're asking to them in the different moments is right, if you know what I mean. Because there is not right or wrong in football, but I think that if you can have this kind of I can say, if you can convince the player, if you can buy in them, and they can follow you, even if you are asking them something completely different for maybe one game. And coming back to the first question, so you can see tactics like adapting to the opponents or creating your own identity. I think there isn't, again, something right or wrong, but you can mix the two things in a balanced way.
Working with the U17s at Roma, how do you prepare them for the pressures of playing at such a big club at that young age group?
I have the privilege to work, as you said, in one of the biggest clubs in Europe, and for sure one of the biggest in Italy. And especially in Italy, AS Roma is known to be one of the clubs that give more players to the first team during the years. So you can understand how big are the expectations of the young players that come to play for AS Roma. I have players from Italy. Most of the players are from Roma, but we have players from a different part of the country, and also different players coming from abroad. I have one Swedish player, one Estonian player, African player. So everyone comes to AS Roma with these big expectations, and this is somewhat easier for me, because a player that plays for AS Roma, especially at under 17 level, is there because he wants to play football. He wants to make football become his future job. And so they are very keen, and they are already educated to train in a certain way, to behave in a certain way. There is the other side of the coin, is that maybe some of them can lose a bit the enjoyment to play, because these big expectations are over them, and sometimes it's not easy. So I always try to mix my coaching style. Of course, I want them to understand that this can be their future, but also I don't want them to lose their enthusiasm and the enjoyment to play, because they're still 16 or 17. So again, it's easy, much easier to coach this kind of players than, for example, maybe lower leagues players, where probably they have lose already this expectation to play. They lost it. They have still this. Sometimes, of course, I have to release a bit the pressure from them, or sometimes when because it can happen, because it's typical from their age. Maybe sometimes someone can mess around a bit. I always ask them one question, and I say to them or to him, listen, if tomorrow you will called up to train with the first team, would you do the same? Would you behave in the same way? Usually the answer is no. So I tell them, so why you have to behave like this with us? So, and this is a question that always put them in the right frame of mind to behave in a way. And then, of course, the good thing is that here at AS Roma we have some guidelines, so the club has already its own football identity, which is, fortunately for me, which is what I believe is the right identity. So possession-based football, try to dominate the game, not to retreat, but try always to defend forward. So all these tactical principles are what I believed in, and so this is easy for me because I didn't have to change my coaching philosophy or football style to adapt to this environment.
We'll just take a quick break here. Coaches, if you're looking to raise your club's profile in the local community and give them a professional look this season, please check out NFHS and FIFA approved custom textured training balls and vests from Bounce Athletics. Fully customised with your logo and colour scheme and produced in the same factories as the global brand balls that you're already using. Bounce Athletics training balls feature a textured PU outer with hybrid seamless construction, so they look, feel and play like match balls. With only 25 ball minimums, a quick 4-week turnaround and a 2-year warranty, Bounce Athletics can still get you a custom look in time for the spring. Modern Soccer Coach podcast listeners can get a $50 discount on their first order of custom balls or training vests by mentioning the podcast when they email info@bounceathletics.com to begin the order process.
The major differences between Italian football and English football in terms of culture and how they train every day, because we hear a lot about this in England. I mean, you've experienced it firsthand. What are the major differences?
This is a tricky question for me because I have worked in England for 3 years, 2 years at Swindon and 1 year, almost 1 year at Sunderland. But the whole staff was Italian. Our coaching style, our preparation to the games and daily basis activities, daily basic training were brought from Italy. So I didn't have the chance to see how the other teams train, but I can I knew it from the other players, the English players, Scottish players, Irish players that we had at Swindon or from the other or at Sunderland. So talking with them and see how they react to our football, our coaching style, I could understand the difference. So, for example, especially in the first part, during the pre-season, where we had the privilege to have good weather, so we stopped a lot. The sessions were long, because Paulo wanted to talk more with the players about tactics, how to do something, what to do in a certain situation, and it was strange for the players, for the English players, because they are more used to start the session, start run, kick, play, 5 sides, and 2 hours strong, big intensity, 100%, and then shower. So I remember Paolo was always telling the players, so you don't need to be always 100% with your legs. You have to be 100% with your head, with your brain, while maybe in certain moments of the session you can be 50%, you can use 50% of your energy, but still 100% here. And this wasn't so easy to transfer to the players. I remember a big problem we had with them with the Wednesday off, because you know more than me that United Kingdom Wednesday is off, is holy in a way for players, because they want to do something different. And when Paulo started to take off this Wednesday, but he wanted them to train also Wednesday, it wasn't easy. We had a lot of frictions with the players for this. Then Paulo was very good to convince the players that to do this little sacrifice, which was big for them, but then they understood that doing something more instead of doing something less could be beneficial for them. And fortunately for us, then we started to get results. And you know that when a player see the results and see the benefit for him and for the team, is more happy to follow you, whatever you ask him. But so probably this was the big difference: the intensity of the sessions, and this Wednesday, which was a problem at the beginning, and it was much more in the third year at Sunderland, where the players, big names and maybe big names, they didn't want to really to change their style, their habits, and we had much more problems to adapt our style to them.
There's a funny video with Paolo talking about ketchup and how that was a problem, and and when he talks about it, you can actually hear that it makes ketchup and mayo. Were diet, were things in the environment? Were you trying to challenge them as well?
Yeah, but to be honest, this nutrition problem with the food and beer, or I don't think is only about ketchup or mayo. That was something for the newspapers that wants and like to reduce the problem to this. I think that ketchup and mayo are not good for any player, not only for English players or Italian players. I think there is something that you have to follow if you want to be an athlete, if you want to be a proper professional. If you want to be a professional at the top level, you have to follow some rules, some guidelines, which are food, which are rest, which are self-care. I remember just a couple of years after we left England, Antonio Conte went to Chelsea and did exactly the same. But he did it, but it was he came with a much more reputation, probably, to be a fantastic coach. So everything he did, it was good from a media point of view. When Paolo did the same, because his reputation probably wasn't the same, then everything was seen negatively. So it was like a lose-lose situation. But I don't think what we asked them, the players, to do was wrong. Probably this is something that we have to admit, and we can learn from that. It's not what you ask the players to do, it's the way probably you ask them to do something, which is another pillar of my coaching style. Whatever I can offer to my players, I can tell them to do. If they don't like me, probably everything I tell them, I want to sell them, they don't like. It's like to be a coach. Sometimes they like to be a salesman. No matter how good can be the product that you want to sell, if your client don't like you, he won't buy what you want to sell. So first, I think you have to create a connection, a link to your players, with your players, and then once they understood that you can sell them something good, then they will accept. Simple as that.
In his interviews, Paolo is he's almost electric. He just lights up the room when he goes in and speaks in front of the camera. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what he was like during the week. Did he ever tone down to go up, or was it just he was himself all the time, or how was that on a daily basis?
No, I think his level was always the same, high. He wanted to do everything 100%. Even, I remember him in our office. He was never quiet. He was always electric, like you said. Is probably his personality, and this was heavy sometimes for whoever worked with him, because you can feel that pressure. You can feel this pressure on yourself, but this, and sometimes was a bit, sometimes too much in certain moments of the season. But on the other side, he was always pushing to the people around him to do their best, always their best. And if you can get this in a positive way, you improve as a player, as a staff, because you know that you have to push always to your limits. It's not easy because you have, in some way, you don't rest. But this will take you to get what you want. And Paulo was exactly like this. I remember him phoning at maybe after midnight to ask a detail from the opponent, because I used to work especially to analyze the opponents, and maybe before a game he phoned me at midnight to ask me, listen, I don't remember this player, what position, what is left-footed, right-footed. So he was very detailed, and he didn't want to leave something to the case, just to always pushing to the limits. That was Paulo, and probably this was also what led him to burn, in a way, his coaching career, because now it's out since 7 years ago, because Sunderland was the last job he had. And it burned from two sides, like a candle that burned from both sides, because it was too much energy, too much. But it's been 3 interesting and fantastic years with him.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, when you talk about getting people to their best and pushing people's standards, I think every coach wants to be that person. But like you said, that can lead to burnout. I mean, how do you balance that then off? If that is in your nature, or that is in your personality, how do you balance that over the period of 15 to 20 years?
I can speak for myself. I'm, of course, I have a totally different approach compared to Paulo's one. And probably this is why we could stay together and work together for 3 years, because if I was like him, probably we fought every day. I think you have to be passionate. You can't lose that, because otherwise the players smell it straight away. But you have to have probably give yourself time to relax and to think maybe to something else, not burn your energy, mental energy and physical energy only for football. Otherwise, you will burn your brain. And this is what I usually do, because I don't like to think only about football during my week, my day. I have also other interests, reading. So you have to give yourself something, a different food, not only football. This is what I learned during my coaching career. Sometimes if you don't think about football, and this was probably Paulo's problem, he thought that if he was thinking something else, he wasn't a good professional. So I remember him, we were doing something else, maybe with the staff, maybe had some fun watching a movie, but then you could see him thinking about football, and I don't want to repeat the same mistake, and I don't do that.
We're going to take our second and final break here to tell you about the aluminum folding dynamo goal from Bounce Athletics. The world's most portable and durable small-sided goal, weighing only 19 pounds, takes only 5 seconds to set up or fold flat. The Dynamo goal is utilised by the entire North American soccer spectrum, from rec programs to MLS clubs, to create a dynamic small-sided training and game environment. Available in 3x5 and 4x6 size, the Dynamo goal requires no staking, so it is perfect on all training surfaces. Net customization is also available for those programs looking to create an even more professional training environment. The goals start at only $257 per goal with free shipping, and Modern Soccer Coach listeners can get a $50 discount on their order when they use the offer code MODERN, not case sensitive, at checkout. Visit www.dynamogoal.com for more details.
Let's talk coach education. Your document on your pro license was, I was just going it through again last night. One of the best reads. Just the detail and the perspective, fantastic. So I appreciate you sharing it. I wanted to get your thoughts just on the Scottish FA have such a great reputation with coach education amongst top coaches. What did you enjoy most about the course?
As you said, Scottish FA. I think they had this reputation is well deserved. Taking account that I started to do my A license in Scotland when I was at Sunderland, and also already I had the chance, the opportunity to understand how good is the coaching education in Scotland. And after completing my A license, I had the chance to do my pro license there, and it's been 2 years of learning, sharing with the colleagues, talking about other big names. And I remember we had Keegan, we had Alan Irvine, Howard Wilkinson, big names, especially in England, and Walter Smith. So when you have the chance to talk and to share something with this kind of professionals and names, you learn, you drink knowledge every day of your life. And for me, especially because I was. We were just 2 foreigners in the pro license course, and one of them left. So I was basically the only foreigner, and so for me there was also the language barrier that could create some problems. But Scottish people and Scottish friends helped me a lot in that, and for me it's been a fantastic experience. I learned a lot. And I always think about those 2 years like something that really helped me in building my following years in my coaching career. Also, I had the privilege to be invited 1 year after to take a lesson to the pro license course, or I don't remember if it was pro license or it was like a convention of Scottish coaches, and I talked about Italian defensive style, which really it wasn't the old-fashioned Italian defensive style, but more I spoke more about Maurizio Sarri's philosophy in defending. So again, this was a big experience for me to share in front of 60, 70 coaches, Scottish coaches. So if you can imagine coming from Italy and talk to them. It's been something that gave me a lot of satisfaction, and I'm happy for that. So I remember these 2 years like fantastic journey.
Yeah, the one that surprised me in your book was, because when I'm reading the book, I'm trying to picture a profile of you as a coach, and I'm thinking this really detail oriented coach, and then the one that I think you wrote 4 pages on and how much you loved it was Kevin Keegan, and I thought, oh wow, that surprised me, because I wouldn't have thought that you would have loved. I mean, what was it about Keegan that stood out to you?
First and foremost, he was like a character, So I take this Keegan's meeting, Keegan speech, to tell something about coaching style, and basically this was something lasted. I took for the whole 2 years, the whole course. Sometimes, Scottish, more than me, the Scottish accent is not easy to understand, especially if you're not English. So for me, it was, I struggled double to get something. But I remember that even if sometimes I couldn't understand exactly what the different speakers said, I remember that was attracted by the style of communication style. So this taught me a lot. Sometimes it's not that important what you say, but the way you communicate, which is something I drove a lot from that course. I remember there's different speakers, and sometimes someone of them was boring, some dull. Some of them were like Keegan, for example. They were so passionate. They were so keen to communicate, and then you realize that you are listening to them. But that said, Keegan talked a lot about how to rebuild a club from the scratch, because he talked about his Newcastle experience. Newcastle at the time wasn't the big club that they are now. And I remember he said that when we first came there, the first thing he did was to repaint the walls of the changing rooms, because they were, so it was a bleach place to live. I remember he said, if you want people to be happy to work, you have to create the right environment for them to work. Otherwise, if the place is broken, there is, you can't give your best. But again, I don't remember exactly now some moments, but I can remember the whole Keegan speech like something that gave me a lot in that specific course. But not only him, because I remember Alan Irvine. At the time, it was just finished his job at West Bromwich Albion, and he spoke a lot about game preparation. And but everyone, I remember, I was learning for everyone, and also for my colleagues, because in that kind of courses you can also share and listen to your colleagues that probably maybe at the time some of them were working in top clubs in Scotland, some of them in England, because I remember Alec Neil was at Norwich at the time in the Premier League. So you can draw from everyone, and if you're humble enough to listen.
Last couple for you. In the first chapter of your reflections, you've got this great phrase that you've said you've got when you were younger. If you get it too soon you will lose it. You're referring to the coach education and the knowledge and the information. And often over here, our American culture or US culture is basically let's get our badges and our licenses as quick as we can so we can get on with the coaching. But you seem to have melded them both together in your journey. Has that been the focal point?
Yeah, I have to say yes, because I started to coach 16 years ago or 17 years ago. And like everyone else, when you start to do something, you would like to know everything straight away. And maybe you think that if you know three things, those three things are what you need. But then you understand that every day you have to learn something different, something new. And this is why I think that if you think you have achieved something in a short period of time, then probably you will lose it in a short period of time. So because I think that especially now with this amount of information we can get from the internet, is easier to think, okay, now I saw this exercise, this drill on the internet. I can do that with my players. So I do this, and that's it. No, I think that you have to learn, you have to talk, you have to listen, you have to practice. Sometimes you have to analyze yourself, and this is something I do. I still have my notes in my computer of what I did 16 years ago, and of course and now I realize that of course something I did in the past I will not do it anymore, because I think it's not anymore the case to do it. So this is why I think that to achieve something, maybe it costs time, it takes time, but then when you get it after a hard work, then probably you can keep it, you can hold it for a long time. So I don't like the shortcuts in life, if you know what I mean. And especially in football, shortcuts can lead you to get something soon, but then this is not they don't grant you to get something in the future. And coaching is a difficult job. To be a coach, we have in the world, I don't know how many coaches there are, but there are more coaches than clubs. And this is why you have to, maybe sometimes it's easy to get in the environment, but it is much more difficult to remain in the job. And fortunately now it's already quite many years that I'm in this job. This I every day anyway, I remember that this doesn't grant me that I will do it, I will be in tomorrow. So I always try to analyze myself, to study more, to look at the others, especially at the older ones, because and this is probably my biggest piece of the advice I want to give to young coaches, to don't think that those who are in the job for a long time can't teach you something. So I want to listen to those who are doing this job for a long time, because I think that old experience doesn't mean old, but means experience, you know. So experience is to do every day something, and the more you do something, the more you know it. And this is why I keep studying, I keep updating, I keep analyzing myself.
Yeah, last one for you. You mentioned there about Paolo keeping players longer and talking, and one of your presentations you said you lost the interest of the players. I wanted to get your thoughts on the players today, and we talk about young people today who have a shorter attention span. And do you have any personal philosophy or rules that you try to keep presentations to, or how do you work around that?
I think we can talk about two different kind of presentations. Or if you talk to adult players, you have to do something. If you talk to young players, you have to do something different. You can't communicate in the same way if you're talking with the first team players or young players. Young players, it's true that they have probably a short attention span, but they are more used to listen for a long time because they go to school. So they are more used to. So I prefer to talk more with young players for a long time rather than do it with the first team players. First team players have much less attention span than young players because of what I said. Sometimes we believe this is the opposite. No, I think young players can listen to you more because their habit to listen to the teachers in school. When you're older players, 20 minutes probably is enough. But once again, I want to stress this. No matter how long you keep your players, is the way you communicate with them. If you use the right communication style, you can keep them even longer. If you are flat, if you are dull, if you are after 5 minutes, you can see someone sleeping. You know what I mean? So we have in this, probably as Italians, we are a bit more advantaged because we used to be more I don't know how to say the right way, but we can keep attention, probably the attention of people when we talk. And especially with the young players, I used to do twice a week a video meeting. I use a lot of videos, clips, which are something that can keep the attention span high. So, and then I try to involve them a lot. Sometimes I joke with them. I want them to smile. I want them, if this is something I learned from Jim Fleeting at Scottish FA. I remember he started at the A license in Scotland. He started every single session, in the room with a small clip. It was like a video, a joke or something where everyone started to laugh. And this was something that, put our mood in a positive way. And so this was something he used to get the attention of everyone. And this is something I keep doing with the players because I think is the right trick to keep this attention alive.
Brilliant. Great way to finish it. Fabrizio, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you. And hopefully we can have a chat in the future again.
Thanks so much to Fabrizio for his time and his insight there. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Yeah, we talked about the coach education side of it towards the end, and that was almost a textbook outlook on coach philosophy, coaching experience, context, not jumping to conclusions, understanding how certain things work in one environment that may not work in another. I just thought that was brilliant. It made you think a lot about generalizations and kind of being a bit broad in how you judge things, looking from the outside, as opposed to looking at the detail inside the environment. And I had high hopes of that podcast interview, and it definitely delivered. So I listened to that a couple of times, and yeah, probably the big takeaway from me there was just that piece on the delivery. He said we are like salespeople. If the player does not like the person who's selling, they are not going to buy. And that is so true, and it doesn't matter what the level or what the information, it's got to, that relationship piece has to be right, yes, but also how you say something is really, really important. And I think that for me goes into the detail that Fabrizio has to, we all think we're detail orientated, but are we detailed enough to look not just at the information but how we're given that information, and when we're given that information, and how we're following up. And you can tell that there's a real common theme throughout that podcast interview was about the context, was about how it's not just a one style fits all approach. His whole career, he started the conversation off about philosophy, and he finished it off not about philosophy in terms of approach, but more of philosophy in action, how he looks at different players at different stages of their career whenever he's given the information when he's coaching them today. So I thought that was brilliant, really, really inspiring, really, really informative. We'd like to hear your thoughts on it, of course, at Gary Curneen on Twitter, at Gary Curneen on Instagram. Really appreciating you listening to the podcast. Stay safe, and I will speak to you very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. For more coaching topics, sessions, and resources, head on over to Coach Curneen on Facebook or visit the website at www.modernsoccercoach.com.